What if I told you that the money in your wallet isn't as real as you think? In a world where the average person believes money is scarce and hard-earned, a shocking truth lurks beneath the surface. Most of the money we use today is created out of thin air, manipulated by powerful banks and shadowy financial institutions. Join us as we unravel the secrets of modern money creation, a system that benefits the few while leaving the many to grapple with the consequences. How banks print wealth out of thin air. Money is everywhere. It flows through every aspect of our lives, buying our groceries, paying our bills, funding massive corporations, and even fueling our dreams. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, where does this money actually come from? Most of us assume it's printed by governments or central banks, that it's rooted in gold or some other physical commodity. But the reality is far more complex and far more alarming. The truth is, a vast majority of the money in circulation isn't real in the traditional sense. It's created out of thin air, with just a few keystrokes by private banks. Section 1. The illusion of money. Money, in its most basic form, used to represent something tangible, gold, silver, or another valuable asset. But as modern banking evolved, this direct connection between money and real assets started to break down. For much of history, paper money was a promise. You could take a banknote to the bank, and it could be exchanged for a specific amount of gold. That was the essence of the gold standard. But over time, as economies grew and modernized, this promise was abandoned. Today, the vast majority of money is created as debt by private banks with no backing whatsoever. This system relies heavily on faith. Faith that the money in your account or the paper in your wallet has real value. But what happens when that faith is shaken? Section 2. How banks create money. Here's how it works. When you deposit $100 in a bank, it doesn't just sit there. The bank is allowed to lend out a significant portion of it, typically up to 90%, to other borrowers. These loans, in turn, become new deposits in the system, allowing other banks to lend out even more money. This is known as fractional reserve banking, and it's the backbone of modern money creation. Through this process, an initial deposit of $100 can multiply into $1,000 or more in circulating money. Each bank loan creates new money, not in the form of physical cash, but as digital entries in bank accounts. Section 3. The game changed in 2020. Until March 2020, banks were required to keep a small percentage of deposits on hand, known as the reserve requirement. But as the pandemic hit, the Federal Reserve made a historic decision. It eliminated the reserve requirement entirely. Now, banks can create infinite amounts of money with no reserves, no real money backing the loans they issue. What does this mean? It means that the system has become even more detached from reality. The money in circulation is created purely through debt, and there's no longer any requirement for banks to hold actual reserves against it. Section 4. How banks gamble with your money. Deposit your money into a bank, you might think it's safely stored, but in reality, banks use your deposits for something else entirely: gambling. Yes, you heard that right. Banks gamble with your money. Derivatives are essentially bets on whether an asset's price will rise or fall. But when taken to the extreme, this kind of speculation can become dangerous. It's part of what caused the global financial crisis in 2008. In that crisis, banks were caught holding vast amounts of risky derivatives tied to subprime mortgages. When the housing market collapsed, so did these derivatives, leading to a chain reaction that took down some of the biggest financial institutions in the world. Section 5. The scale of the problem: a quadrillion-dollar gamble. The scary part? This gamble hasn't stopped. Today, the derivatives market is estimated to be over $1 quadrillion. That's more than 10 times the size of the global economy. In essence, banks and financial institutions have made the system so complex and risky that no one fully understands how much money is tied up in these bets. It's like a game of musical chairs, but with trillions of dollars at stake. When the music stops, we have no idea who will be left standing. Section 6. Bailouts and moral hazard. When these risky bets go wrong, there's a safety net in place: the government, or more specifically, the central banks. In 2008, when major banks were on the verge of collapse, the US government stepped in with a massive $700 billion bailout through the program known as TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program. Section 7 of Easing and Central Bank Money Creation. The bailout wasn't the only tool used to save the system. Central banks began a process called quantitative easing, or QE. This is when central banks, like the Federal Reserve, create money to buy government bonds and other financial assets. In the wake of the 2008 crisis, the Federal Reserve created hundreds of billions of dollars this way, flooding the banking system with liquidity. Today, central banks hold vast amounts of financial assets, including government debt, corporate bonds, and even stocks. In fact, the balance sheet of the Bank of Japan is now bigger than the entire GDP of Japan itself. They even own 80% of the Japanese stock market. Central banks have become the biggest players in the financial markets, and they are essentially creating money out of nothing to buy real assets. This creates a massive distortion in the market, pushing up asset prices and making the rich richer. Section 8. Since 2008, the stock market has soared to record heights, even while millions of people lost their jobs, wages stagnated, and inequality widened. Why? Because central banks are pumping trillions into the stock market, inflating the value of stocks, real estate, and other assets. Meanwhile, ordinary people are left behind, unable to participate in these gains. Section 9. The consequences of inflation and stagflation. All of this money creation, by private banks, governments, and central banks, comes with a price: inflation. As more money is created, its value decreases, leading to higher prices for goods and services. In the short term, this can create an economic boom, but in the long term, it erodes the purchasing power of ordinary people. We're seeing it today. Housing prices are skyrocketing, food and energy costs are rising, and wages aren't keeping pace. This is the direct result of years of money creation and economic distortion. Section 10. What can be done? Some believe that we need to return to a more stable form of money, such as gold or Bitcoin. Others argue for reforms to the banking system, limiting the ability of banks to create money through loans. And then there are those who advocate for a universal basic income, funded by central bank money creation, to ensure that everyone benefits from the system, not just the wealthy. Money makes the world go round, but who controls that money, and at what cost? These are questions we must all ask ourselves as we navigate an increasingly unstable financial system. In the end, knowledge is power. The more we understand how money works, the better prepared we'll be for whatever comes next.